$60,000 of my inheritance money just bought me a front row seat to watch some 28-year-old manipulator destroy my family. My name is Victoria James, and at 55 years old, I thought I'd seen enough betrayal to last a lifetime. Apparently, I was wrong. 3 weeks ago, my stepson Joshua announced his engagement with all the fanfare of a royal wedding. The kid I'd raised from 16, funded through law school, and loved like my own flesh and blood was getting married. And I was thrilled. Genuinely, stupidly thrilled. When he and Melissa came to dinner that Sunday night, glowing with happiness and talking about their dream wedding in Italy, I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. I opened my checkbook and offered to pay for the whole thing. $60,000 from the inheritance my parents left me when they died in that car accident 3 years ago. Money that was supposed to be for our retirement, for emergencies, for something meaningful. Well, it certainly turned out to be meaningful. Just not in the way I expected. Melissa had tears in her eyes when I made the offer. Called me her second mother right there at our dining table. Said she couldn't believe how generous I was. How lucky Joshua was to have me. My husband Daniel smiled that proud smile he gets when family moments go perfectly. Joshua hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. For 3 blissful weeks, I planned and dreamed alongside them. Melissa would call me every few days with updates, asking my opinion on flowers, venues, catering. She seemed to value my input, made me feel essential to the process. When she mentioned they'd actually been engaged privately for over a year, but kept it secret to avoid family drama during planning, it made perfect sense. Smart girl, I thought. Considerate. I should have known better. The unraveling started during what should have been a simple conversation about guest lists. We were sitting in my kitchen last Tuesday, Melissa with her laptop open, me with my reading glasses on, going through names and addresses. Normal wedding planning stuff. "Oh, I should mention," she said, fingers dancing across her keyboard. "I've been coordinating with Jessie about the pre-wedding events." Jessie, Joshua's biological mother, the woman who cheated on Daniel and walked out when Joshua was 15, leaving behind a devastated teenager and a broken marriage. I blinked. "You've been what now?" "Coordinating with Jessie," Melissa repeated, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "She's been so helpful with planning. We've had her involved in several events already." Several events. Already. What events? I asked, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. Melissa rattled off a list. Engagement parties I hadn't been invited to. Bridal events I hadn't heard about. A shower that happened 2 weekends ago that I only found out about because someone tagged a photo on Instagram. I thought we agreed to keep things small, I said carefully. "Oh, these were just intimate gatherings," Melissa said, her voice bright and dismissive. "You know how it is. Just the girls. Just the girls." Apparently I didn't qualify. When I confronted Joshua that night, my stepson looked genuinely conflicted. For a moment I thought maybe this was all some misunderstanding. Maybe Melissa had gotten carried away with planning and forgotten to include me. But then he started defending her. Said she'd helped him understand that his biological mother deserved a chance to reconnect. That excluding her would be cruel. That I needed to be more understanding about complex family dynamics. Complex family dynamics. Right. Because I hadn't spent 12 years navigating those exact dynamics when I married his father and became his mother figure overnight. The conversation spiraled downward from there. Joshua got defensive. I got frustrated. Voices were raised. Daniel tried to play peacekeeper from the sidelines, which only made things worse. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Melissa. "Hi, Victoria. After thinking it over, we've decided the engagement party should be more intimate. We're going to keep it to immediate family only. Thanks for understanding. P.S. Jessie is so excited to celebrate with us as an honored guest." I stared at that message until the words blurred together. Immediate family only. But Jessie was invited as an honored guest. The woman who abandoned Joshua was immediate family. The woman who'd raised him for 12 years was not. That's when the other pieces started clicking into place. All those phone calls Melissa took in private, stepping away with hushed voices, the way she'd close her phone or minimize apps when people walked by, how she seemed to know oddly specific details about our family's charity work and real estate investments from before she supposedly met Joshua. And those calls, always from her old college friend who was helping with wedding planning. But wedding planners don't usually require that level of secrecy. Normal people don't get defensive when asked about flower arrangements or catering choices. Something was wrong. Not just wrong, calculated, deliberate. I've spent the last 3 days lying awake at night, replaying every interaction I've had with Melissa, every conversation, every hug, every tearful thank you for my generosity, looking for the cracks in what I now suspected was a very carefully constructed performance. Because here's what I know about people after 55 years on this planet. Genuine gratitude doesn't come with manipulation. Real family bonds don't require excluding the people who've actually been there. And someone who truly loves your son doesn't systematically isolate him from the people who raised him. I need to know exactly who Melissa Moore really is. Not the version she's presented to us, but the real person behind the wedding planning and the strategic phone calls and the tears of gratitude. Which is why I'm sitting at my computer at 2 a.m, typing private investigator into Google. Time to find out what I'm really dealing with before I hand over $60,000 and watch my stepson marry a stranger. 3 weeks later, I'm staring at a manila envelope that just destroyed everything I thought I knew about my stepson's fairy tale romance. The private investigator's name was Marcus Chen, and his Google reviews were exactly what you'd expect from someone who specialized in exposing cheaters and con artists. 5 stars across the board with testimonials like, "He saved me from the worst mistake of my life and worth every penny to learn the truth." I'd hired him on a Tuesday morning after Daniel left for work, transferring $5,000 from my personal account, like I was buying groceries instead of potentially blowing up my family. And now, 21 days later, Marcus had delivered a file thick enough to choke on. Melissa hadn't just researched our family before meeting Joshua. She'd practically written a dissertation on us. According to Marcus's findings, she'd accessed public property records showing our home's value, my parents' estate transfers, and Daniel's business registration documents. She'd scrolled through 3 years of my social media posts, screenshotting charity events and volunteer activities. She'd even found my parents' obituary from the car accident and cross-referenced the inheritance timeline with public court filings. But the charity gala where she and Joshua supposedly had their magical first meeting? Melissa had bought her ticket 2 weeks in advance, specifically after confirming Joshua would be attending as my guest. She'd positioned herself at the silent auction table for the literacy program I'd been championing for 5 years, right where she knew I'd bring him to bid on items. Their whole love story was choreographed bullshit. The social media timeline was even more damning. In March, she'd posted a photo of herself at a coffee shop wearing what she captioned as, "My new favorite watch, early birthday gift from Mom." But she'd used the same watch and photos from their supposed first meeting in February. Either time travel was real, or she'd been lying about when they actually met. And Jesse. God, the Jesse situation made my skin crawl. Marcus had found the initial contact through public Instagram messages. Melissa had reached out to Joshua's biological mother 6 months before the engagement announcement, using the same researched empathy that had worked on me. "I can't imagine how hard it must be to miss so much of Joshua's life," she'd written. "He talks about you more than you might think." She'd spent weeks building that relationship, encouraging Jesse to reconnect while simultaneously orchestrating events that excluded me. Every engagement party I hadn't been invited to, every intimate family gathering that somehow didn't include the woman who'd raised Joshua through high school. It was all calculated to isolate me from my own influence within the family. The private investigator couldn't access their actual conversations, but the public message thread told enough of the story. Melissa, playing sympathetic listener to Jesse's guilt, Melissa offering to help facilitate mother-son bonding, Melissa positioning herself as the bridge between Joshua and the mother who'd abandoned him, all while slowly but systematically cutting me out. I called Joshua immediately. Not Daniel, not a family meeting, just straight to the source with my evidence in hand and my patience completely shot. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "Now." "Victoria, I'm at work. Melissa researched our entire family before she ever met you. She targeted us, Joshua. I have proof." The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "What are you talking about?" I laid it out systematically. The property records, the financial research, the strategic positioning at the charity event, the social media inconsistencies, every calculated move she'd made to infiltrate our family. Joshua's breathing got heavier as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for almost a minute. "Some of this," he started, then stopped. "There have been things that bothered me. Questions she asked that seemed oddly specific. But Victoria, people research families they're getting involved with. That's normal now. Normal people don't spend months plotting to exclude your stepmother from your life. I need to call her. I need to hear her side of this." Before I could argue, he put me on speaker and was dialing Melissa. My stomach dropped as I heard her voice come through the phone, bright and unsuspecting. "Hi, baby. How's your day going?" "Melissa, Victoria has some concerns she wants to discuss with us." A pause. "Oh, okay. What kind of concerns?" Joshua's voice got formal, like he was reading from a legal brief. She hired a private investigator who found evidence that you researched our family extensively before we met. The silence was deafening. I could practically hear Melissa's mind racing through the phone. Then her voice came back, but different, wounded, shaky. Joshua, your stepmother has been making me uncomfortable for weeks. I didn't want to say anything because I know how much you love her, but this investigation proves what I've been afraid of. She's becoming obsessive. My jaw dropped. Obsessive? You targeted my family. Victoria, Melissa interrupted, and now her voice had tears in it. I understand this is hard for you. Change is always difficult. But Joshua and I are building our own life together, and your need to control everything is exactly what drove your husband's first marriage apart. The room went silent. Even through speakerphone, I could feel the impact of those words on Joshua. That's not, I started. You hired a private investigator to spy on your son's fiancée, Melissa continued, her voice gaining strength. You've excluded me from family decisions while demanding to control our wedding. You've made me feel unwelcome in what should be my new family. And now you're presenting research about public records as if I've committed some crime. Joshua's voice, when it came, was tight with anger. Victoria, you hired an investigator? Without talking to any of us? Joshua, listen to what I found. No, you listen. Melissa is right. This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior that destroyed my parents' marriage. You've overstepped boundaries that shouldn't need to be explained to a grown woman. My throat went dry. I was protecting you. From what? From someone who loves me? From building a life with the person I chose? His voice was getting louder. You need to respect my choices, Victoria. I'm not your little boy anymore. But the evidence shows you violated our privacy and trust. That's what the evidence shows. I tried to push back, tried to make him see what was right in front of him, but every word I said made him angrier, made him more defensive, made Melissa sound more reasonable by comparison. Finally, Joshua cut me off completely. I need space to think about this. Don't contact me about this again. I'll call you when I'm ready. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen holding my phone, staring at the investigator's report scattered across my dining table, feeling like I'd just watched a masterclass in manipulation. Melissa had turned my evidence into proof of my obsession in under 10 minutes. That evening, Daniel found me still sitting at the table with the manila envelope. How did it go? He asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. I told him everything. The phone call, Melissa's response, Joshua's reaction. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression getting more troubled as I talked. When I finished, he sat down across from me and ran his hands through his hair. Victoria, some of this evidence is genuinely concerning, especially the strategic positioning and the research. But... He paused, choosing his words carefully. You hired a private investigator without discussing it with me first. I was protecting our family. Our son has a right to make his own mistakes. Even if Melissa was being calculating, that doesn't necessarily make her malicious. People research families they're marrying into. It's not ideal, but it's not automatically predatory. I stared at him. You think I'm wrong. I think you're pushing him away. I think your methods are destroying our relationship with Joshua over suspicions that might have innocent explanations. Innocent explanations? Maybe she was nervous about meeting us and did too much research. Maybe her questions about finances came from wanting to understand what she was marrying into. Maybe she reached out to Jesse because she genuinely thought it would help Joshua heal. Daniel's voice was getting firmer. Maybe all of this looks suspicious because you're looking for reasons to be suspicious. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My own husband thought I was losing my mind. But as I lay awake that night, replaying the phone conversation over and over, I realized Daniel was partly right about one thing. Going directly to Joshua had been a mistake. I'd handed Melissa the perfect opportunity to make me look crazy while positioning herself as the victim. I needed a different approach. Someone who could reach Joshua without looking like the obsessive stepmother who'd hired private investigators and violated boundaries. Someone who had just as much to lose if Melissa was really playing a long game. The next morning, I called Jesse. Hi, Jesse, it's Victoria. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime soon. I'd love to talk about the wedding and see if we can work together to make this special for Joshua. Jesse's voice came through my phone like she'd been waiting for this call her whole life. Victoria? Oh my goodness, yes. I would love that. I've been hoping we could talk more about Joshua and the wedding. Melissa mentioned you might reach out. Of course she did. Because apparently my future daughter-in-law was 3 steps ahead of everyone, including me. Wonderful, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. How about that little cafe on Maple Street? Tomorrow around 10? We met the next morning, and I have to admit, Seeing Jessie in person after all these years was jarring. She looked older, obviously, but there was something fragile about her that hadn't been there during the marriage. Like someone who'd spent a decade walking on eggshells and had just learned to trust the ground again. She ordered a latte with extra foam and clutched it like a lifeline while I played my part perfectly. The gracious stepmother. The woman who just wanted what was best for Joshua. I have to say, I began carefully, I'm so happy you and Joshua have reconnected. It means everything to him. Jessie's eyes filled with tears. Actual tears. I never thought I'd get this chance again. When Melissa first reached out to me, I was terrified Joshua would reject me completely. Melissa reached out to you? Oh yes, about 6 months ago. She sent me this beautiful message on Instagram saying she could see how much Joshua missed having his mother in his life. Jessie dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. She encouraged me to write him letters, help me figure out what to say. 6 months ago, before they were even officially engaged. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. That was thoughtful of her, I said. What kind of advice did she give you? Jessie lit up like I'd asked about her favorite topic. She was so insightful about family dynamics. She said I should focus on shared memories, acknowledge the pain I'd caused, but also talk about my work and how I'd grown. She paused. Actually, she was really curious about my paralegal work, asked detailed questions about what I did, how I analyzed legal documents, whether I'd learned to spot inconsistencies in people's stories. Interesting. Why would someone planning a wedding care? About paralegal skills? Over the next 2 hours, Jessie painted a picture of a woman who'd been systematically coached back into her son's life, and the more she talked, the more I realized how calculating Melissa had been about every detail. She even helped me plan what to wear to our first coffee meeting, Jessie continued. Said I should look successful but not threatening. Professional but warm. That's very specific advice, I said. Right? I thought so too, but it worked. Joshua and I have been talking regularly for months now. Though, she hesitated. There have been some things that struck me as odd. My pulse quickened. What kind of things? Jessie lowered her voice. Well, Melissa asks a lot of questions about family finances. Very specific ones. She wanted to know about your inheritance, your investment portfolio, what properties you own. At first I thought she was just trying to understand what she was marrying into, but the questions were so detailed, almost like she was conducting research. There it was. The confirmation I'd been hoping for. That does seem unusual for casual conversation, I agreed carefully. Exactly. And when I mentioned that you'd paid for Joshua's law school, she asked about the exact amounts, the payment schedule, whether you had liquid assets readily available. Jessie frowned. I work with financial documents all day. Those aren't normal, getting to know the family questions. I let Jessie talk, asking gentle follow-up questions while she unwittingly provided more evidence of Melissa's calculated approach. By the time we parted ways, I had a plan. Over the next 2 months, I cultivated a friendship with Jessie that felt surprisingly genuine despite my ulterior motives. We met every Tuesday at the same cafe, bonding over our shared love for Joshua and our complex feelings about blended family dynamics. Jessie was actually good company when she wasn't wallowing in guilt about the past. She had a sharp sense of humor and this methodical way of analyzing situations that came from years of legal work. Plus, she was grateful for my acceptance in a way that made me feel genuinely needed. But more importantly, she was the perfect person to help me plant seeds of doubt. You know, I said during our third meeting, Melissa mentioned something about your conversation that didn't quite match what Joshua told me. Nothing major, just small details that seemed inconsistent. Jessie's paralegal instincts immediately perked up. What kind of inconsistencies? Oh, timeline stuff mostly. When certain conversations happened, who said what first? I shrugged. Probably just normal memory differences. But Jessie started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. By our 6th meeting, she was keeping notes. Actual written notes about conversations with Melissa, dates and times documented like evidence. It's a professional habit, she explained when I noticed her little notebook. I document everything at work, helps me spot patterns. And boy, did she start spotting patterns. Victoria, I've been thinking about those financial questions Melissa asked, Jessie said during our 8th coffee date. I went back through my notes and they're incredibly sophisticated. She wasn't asking about general wealth. She was specifically focused on liquid assets, investment accounts that could be accessed quickly, properties that could be liquidated easily. That does sound oddly specific. It's exactly the kind of information someone would need if they were planning to access family assets quickly after marriage. Jessie's voice was getting tighter, and when I think about how she guided our early conversations, She was getting me to reveal specific family information that I now realize was being used strategically. The breakthrough came during our 10th week of friendship. Jessie called me on a Thursday evening, her voice shaking. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. I overheard a phone conversation." I gripped my phone tighter. "What kind of conversation?" "Melissa was at Joshua's apartment when I stopped by to drop off some old photos. She didn't know I was there and took a call in the bedroom. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but she was talking loud enough that I couldn't help but hear." Jessie paused, and I could hear her breathing heavily. She was discussing plans to phase out the biological mother after the wedding. Said I had served my purpose in creating division within the family and would no longer be needed once the marriage provided access to family assets. My blood went cold. "Are you sure that's what she said?" "Word for word, Victoria. I wrote it down as soon as I got to my car." Jessie's voice broke. "She's been using me. She never wanted to help Joshua reconnect with his mother. She wanted to use me as a weapon against you, and once she gets what she wants, I'll lose my son all over again." That conversation changed everything. Jessie went from grateful and hopeful to terrified and angry. Her paralegal training kicked into high gear, and she started analyzing every interaction with Melissa like it was evidence in a fraud case. But while Jessie and I were building our alliance, Melissa wasn't oblivious to what was happening. I noticed it first at the grocery store when I ran into her in the produce section. She was perfectly pleasant, but there was something different in her eyes. Calculating. Suspicious. "I see you and Jessie have been spending a lot of time together," she said, selecting apples with deliberate care. "We have. It's wonderful that Joshua has his mother back in his life." "It is." Melissa's smile was sharp, "though I hope you're not filling her head with any of your concerns about our relationship. Jessie's in such a fragile place emotionally." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. "Stay away from Jessie, or I'll paint you as the manipulative stepmother who's poisoning the biological mother's mind." Meanwhile, my relationship with Joshua remained strained, and Daniel was growing more distant by the day. He'd started working late most nights, and when he was home he had this disappointed look that made my chest tight. "You're obsessing again," he said one evening as I lay awake scrolling through my phone at midnight. "I'm protecting our family." "You're destroying it." He rolled over, putting his back to me. "And you're destroying yourself." He wasn't wrong about the destroying myself part. I was barely sleeping, consumed with thoughts of Melissa's manipulation and feeling increasingly desperate as the wedding date approached. Every conversation with Joshua felt forced. Every family interaction seemed like a performance where I was the only one who didn't know my lines. The stress was affecting my judgment, making me question everything I said and did. Was I being paranoid? Was I really becoming the controlling stepmother everyone seemed to think I was? Then came the family dinner that changed everything. Daniel had suggested it as a way to get back to normal, whatever that meant. Joshua and Melissa came over on a Sunday evening, and I tried my best to play the supportive stepmother role, but Melissa wasn't interested in playing nice anymore. "You know," she said during dessert, her voice sweet but her eyes cold, "it's interesting how some people just can't let go of control, how they create drama instead of supporting love." I felt Daniel tense beside me. Joshua looked uncomfortable. "I think family transitions are hard for everyone," I said carefully. "They are, especially for people who are used to being the center of attention." Melissa's smile could have cut glass. "Take this whole private investigator situation. I mean, most people would just trust their family members to make good decisions, right?" My stomach dropped. She was bringing up the investigation in front of everyone, framing it as proof of my obsession. "Melissa," Joshua said quietly, "we don't need to discuss that." "But we do, baby, because this behavior affects our whole family." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Your stepmother hired someone to spy on me, on us. That's not protective concern, that's obsessive control." Joshua's face was conflicted, but he didn't defend me. Daniel was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. "I was trying to protect you," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "From what? From someone who loves your son? From building a life with the person I chose?" Melissa's voice rose slightly. "This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior that destroyed your husband's first marriage." The room went silent. Even bringing up Daniel's divorce was crossing a line, but Melissa had calculated it perfectly. She turned my protective instincts into evidence of the same jealousy and control that had driven Jessie away. After dinner, as they were leaving, I watched Melissa pull Jessie aside in the hallway. They spoke in low voices, and I could see Melissa working her magic. Concerned expressions, gentle touches on Jessie's arm, earnest eye contact, but something was different this time. Instead of nodding along, Jessie was watching Melissa's face with that same analytical expression she got when reviewing legal documents, looking for inconsistencies, spotting the cracks in the performance. The drive home with Daniel was excruciating. "She's right, he said as we pulled out of Joshua's driveway, "about the controlling behavior, about how this is affecting our family. She's manipulating all of us. Maybe, or maybe you're so convinced she's the enemy that you can't see how your methods are pushing everyone away." Daniel's voice was tired. "You need to let this go, Victoria, before you destroy your relationship with our son permanently." But as I stared out the passenger window, watching streetlights blur past, I knew I was already in too deep to stop now. Time was running out before the wedding. Jesse was my only ally, and everything I loved was slipping away. I couldn't let go. Not when I was finally so close to the truth. But while I was spiraling into sleepless nights and growing paranoia, my marriage was quietly falling apart. Daniel started working late more often, and when he was home, he had this careful distance in his voice, like he was talking to a neighbor instead of his wife. And when Joshua called to complain about my behavior, which happened twice that week, Daniel just listened and said things like, "I understand your concerns," instead of defending me. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. One morning I woke up to find Daniel making coffee for one instead of two. When I asked about it, he said he figured I wasn't sleeping anyway, so why bother making extra? "I'm trying to protect our family," I said. "You're destroying it," he replied, not even looking at me. "And you're destroying yourself." He wasn't wrong about the destroying myself part. I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, consumed with thoughts of Melissa's manipulation and growing more desperate as the wedding date approached. Every conversation felt like I was walking through a minefield. Every family interaction seemed like a performance where everyone else knew their lines except me. The stress was eating me alive. My judgment was shot. I found myself questioning everything I said and did, second-guessing every interaction, until I wasn't sure what was real anymore. But Jessie was having better luck with her investigation than I was having with my family relationships. She called me on a Wednesday evening while Daniel was working late again, her voice tight with excitement and anger. "Victoria, I found something. Multiple somethings." "What kind of somethings?" "Business filings, public records. I've been cross-referencing everything Melissa mentioned about her work history with state business. Databases." Jessie's paralegal training was coming through big time. She's been involved in at least 3 questionable business partnerships over the past 4 years. My pulse quickened. "What kind of partnerships?" "The kind that target wealthy families through strategic positioning. One involved a catering company that specifically worked high-end charity events. Another was a financial consulting firm that specialized in estate planning for wealthy widows." Jessie paused. "But here's the really disturbing part. In 2 cases, the partnerships ended right after marriages provided access to family assets." I gripped my phone tighter. "Are you sure?" "I'm looking at court documents from a civil case in Nevada. A 73-year-old widow named Margaret Chen filed suit against a financial consulting firm for manipulating her son into marriage as part of an asset extraction scheme. The firm was dissolved 6 months after the case was filed, but the principals were never prosecuted because they technically operated within legal boundaries. And Melissa was involved? Her name is on the business registration as a communications consultant. Same exact pattern. Strategic positioning at charity events, cultivated relationships with family members, marriage providing access to investment accounts. This was it. This was the proof I needed. But when I tried to call Joshua to share Jesse's findings, he sent me straight to voicemail. When I texted asking for a meeting, he responded with a single line, "I need space, Victoria. I can't handle more accusations right now." Space. He needed space from the woman who'd raised him while his real mother was off living her best life with a baseball coach. That night, lying awake again while Daniel slept with his back to me, I felt something crack inside my chest. Everything I'd built was crumbling, and everyone I loved was pulling away. And meanwhile, Melissa was probably planning exactly how to access our accounts after the honeymoon. Marcus, my private investigator, called the next morning with more information that should have felt like victory, but instead felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion. "I tracked down the person your daughter-in-law's been calling regularly," he said. "Turns out it's her ex-boyfriend from college. Guy named David Walsh works in financial consulting now." "What kind of financial consulting?" "Asset research for investment purposes. At least that's what his business license says." Marcus's voice had that tone investigators get when they're delivering bad news. But I found some interesting social media activity. Public posts showing he and Melissa have maintained a very close relationship despite her engagement. My stomach dropped. How close? Close enough that they've been discussing specific investment strategies and coordinating research on wealthy families through charity event databases. The kind of coordination that suggests they're still very much in business together. Can you prove that? I can prove they're communicating regularly and that his research focuses on the exact type of family she's been positioning herself with. But proving intent? That's harder without access to private communications. I thanked Marcus and hung up, staring at the evidence that should have been enough to save my family. Should have been enough to make Joshua listen. But when I called him again, he didn't even answer. So I did something stupid, something desperate, something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I created a fake Facebook account, used a stock photo of a middle-aged woman and the name Sarah Mitchell, spent 2 hours crafting a believable profile with generic posts about gardening and book clubs. Then I started sending anonymous messages to wedding guests, not accusations, just information. Links to publicly available business records showing Melissa's previous partnerships, screenshots of the Nevada court case involving Margaret Chen, public social media posts documenting the ongoing relationship between Melissa and her ex-boyfriend. I told myself I was just sharing facts, public information that anyone could find if they looked hard enough. I wasn't making anything up or violating anyone's privacy, but I was sleep-deprived and desperate and making decisions with the rational judgment of someone who'd been awake for 72 hours straight, which is why I made the mistake that destroyed everything. In one of the messages, sent to Joshua's college roommate who was flying in for the wedding, I referenced a conversation about our family's investment portfolio that had happened at a private dinner 2 months ago, a discussion about Daniel's business expansion plans and our retirement account allocations that Melissa had asked very specific questions about. Only family members knew about that conversation. Only people who'd been sitting at our dining table that night. The message was sent at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, my world imploded. Joshua called demanding an emergency family meeting. His voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. We need to talk, all of us, tonight. Daniel and I showed up at Joshua's apartment to find Melissa sitting on the couch with her laptop open and a look of wounded betrayal that belonged on a Broadway stage. "Before we start," Joshua said, his voice tight with anger, "I want everyone to see what's been happening." Melissa turned her laptop around to show screenshots of the anonymous messages I'd sent. Every single one, including the one that referenced our private family dinner. "Someone has been harassing our wedding guests with anonymous accusations," she said, her voice shaking with perfectly calibrated emotion. "Someone with access to private family information. Someone who was at our dinner in March when we discussed your parents' investment plans." My throat went dry. Joshua's face was devastated. "Victoria, please tell me you didn't do this." I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain that I was trying to protect him, but the words wouldn't come, because there was no defending what I'd done, no explaining away the anonymous harassment campaign, or the violation of trust. "I was trying to save you," I finally whispered. "From what?" Joshua's voice cracked. "From someone who loves me? From building a life with the person I chose? From someone who's been systematically targeting our family for our money? By harassing people anonymously? By lying to all of us about your activities?" Joshua was shouting now. "This is exactly the kind of controlling, destructive behavior that drove my mother away. And now you're doing it to me." The comparison hit like a physical blow. I wasn't anything like Jesse. I'd never abandoned him. I'd never betrayed him. Except apparently I had. Melissa reached across to take Joshua's hand, her eyes filling with tears. "I know this is hard, baby, but your stepmother has become someone none of us recognize. This obsessive harassment has to stop." "It's not harassment when it's the truth," I started. "It's harassment when you create fake accounts to spread accusations to our friends." Joshua cut me off. "It's harassment when you hire private investigators without telling anyone. It's harassment when you violate people's privacy and then lie about it." Daniel was sitting beside me in complete silence, but I could feel his horror radiating outward like heat from a fire. "Joshua, please, just look at the evidence." "I don't want to hear it." His voice was final. "You're uninvited from the wedding, Victoria. I need space from you, possibly permanently." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. After they left, Daniel and I sat in Joshua's living room in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, he spoke. "You crossed a line, Victoria. Multiple lines. The anonymous messages, the lying about your activities, the violation of people's privacy." His voice was quiet but devastated. "I don't know who you've become, but it's not the woman I married." We drove home in silence. Daniel went straight to his workshop and I went to bed alone, feeling like I'd just watched my entire life collapse in real time. But at 9 p.m. my phone rang. "Jesse, Victoria, I need to tell you something. I've been conducting my own investigation using public record searches, and I think I know exactly what we're dealing with." I sat up in bed. "What did you find?" "A pattern. A clear documented pattern of Melissa and her ex-boyfriend, targeting wealthy families through strategic positioning at charity events, followed by marriages designed to provide access to family assets. Jesse's voice was steady but urgent. I've compiled publicly available evidence spanning 4 years in 3 different states. Business filings, property transfers, court documents. It's all here. Can you prove it? I can prove. Coordination. I can prove a history of suspicious business relationships. I can prove that her ex-boyfriend's financial consulting firm has specialized in asset research for wealthy families, with Melissa serving as the inside contact who gains access through marriage. Jesse paused. Victoria, she's done this before, multiple times. We're not paranoid, we're right. I felt something like relief wash over me, followed immediately by devastation. It doesn't matter. Joshua won't listen to me anymore. He might listen to me. I'm still officially invited as the mother of the groom. I could try to warn him privately before the ceremony. Jesse, if we're wrong about this, we're not wrong. I've been manipulated too, Victoria. She used me to isolate you, to create division within the family, and once she gets what she wants, I'll lose my son all over again. Jesse's voice got stronger. I want to help protect him, even if it means working with you. That's how I ended up forming an alliance with the woman who'd broken my husband's heart and abandoned my stepson when he needed her most. The wedding is in 2 weeks, Jesse said. If we're going to reach him, it has to be before the ceremony. Once they're married and she has legal access to family assets, it'll be too late. I stared at my bedroom ceiling, knowing that even if we succeeded in exposing Melissa's scheme, I'd already lost Joshua's love. And probably Daniel's too, but I couldn't let her destroy my family's future, even if saving it meant sacrificing my place in it. 2 days later, I'm booking a flight to Italy like some kind of deranged wedding crasher. The decision happened at 3 a.m. while Daniel slept beside me, completely unaware that his wife was about to cross the final line between protective and psychotic. But I couldn't stop thinking about Jesse's evidence. Business filings showing Melissa's ex-boyfriend's financial consulting firm specialized in targeting wealthy families. Property records documenting coordinated asset transfers from previous victims. Public documents proving this wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. And Joshua was walking straight into it, wearing a tuxedo and a smile. The hotel booking confirmation arrived in my email at 3:47 a.m. Single occupancy, king bed, view of the Mediterranean. Perfect spot for watching my family implode in real time. Jessie and I had been texting constantly since she'd compiled her evidence. Her paralegal training was like having a bloodhound on the case. She'd found business registrations, court filings, and property transfers that painted a clear picture of systematic financial targeting. The kind of documentation that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence or jealous speculation. The pattern is undeniable, she texted the night before. 3 different states, 4 different families, same methodology every time. Strategic positioning at charity events, cultivation of family relationships, marriage providing access to, investment accounts. I'd stared at her message until my eyes burned. We were right. We were absolutely, documentably right. But being right and being welcome at the wedding were 2 very different things. The plan was simple. Jessie would try to reach Joshua privately before the ceremony. She was still officially invited as the mother of the groom, still had access to the family gathering spaces. If she could get him alone for 10 minutes with the evidence, maybe we could prevent this disaster without the nuclear option. If not, well, I'd be lurking outside like some kind of discount private investigator with serious boundary issues. The flight to Rome was 7 hours of second-guessing every decision I'd made since hiring Marcus Chen. Daniel thought I was visiting my college roommate in Philadelphia for the weekend. Another lie in a growing collection that was starting to feel heavier than my carry-on luggage. But what choice did I have? Watch Melissa systematically drain our family's wealth while everyone called me crazy? Let Joshua walk into a marriage designed to extract assets, while I played the supportive stepmother from the sidelines? Some battles are worth fighting even when you know they'll cost you everything. The venue was exactly what I'd expected from Melissa's Pinterest-perfect planning. A clifftop villa overlooking the Amalfi Coast, terraced gardens cascading toward the Mediterranean, fairy lights strung between olive trees like something from a romance novel. The kind of place that charged more for one weekend than most people made in a month. All paid for with our family's money, naturally. I positioned myself behind a stone wall about 50 yards from the main terrace, close enough to see but far enough to avoid detection, like a wildlife photographer stalking particularly expensive prey. And then I saw Joshua. He was standing near the altar in his charcoal gray tuxedo, talking with his groomsmen and laughing at something his best man had said. His hair was perfectly styled, his smile was genuine, and he looked happier than I'd seen him in months. He looked like a man in love on his wedding day. My resolve wavered for the first time since booking the hotel room. What if I was wrong? What if Melissa's research had been innocent curiosity? What if her strategic positioning was just an insecure woman trying to fit into a wealthy family? What if I was about to destroy my stepson's happiness based on business filings and property records that had perfectly reasonable explanations? Then I spotted Daniel near the guest seating area, adjusting his tie and checking his watch. My husband looked distinguished in his navy suit, completely unaware that his wife was crouched behind a wall like some kind of demented wedding spy. When he turned and scanned the terrace, his eyes swept right past my hiding spot, but something in his posture suggested he was looking for someone. Looking for me. A moment later, his gaze found mine across the garden. The disappointment on his face hit me like a physical blow. Not surprise, not anger, just this deep, bone-tired disappointment that said he'd somehow known I'd be here. Known I'd taken my obsession this far. He shook his head slowly, then turned away. That's when I realized the full scope of what I'd sacrificed. Not just Joshua's trust or my relationship with Melissa. I was watching my marriage crumble in real time, and Daniel didn't even look surprised anymore. The ceremony began at sunset, because of course it did. Melissa emerged from the villa looking like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine, her ivory dress catching the golden light perfectly. Joshua's face when he saw her walking down the aisle was everything a groom's should be. Awed, grateful, completely in love. I watched through the window of a storage building while a man I'd helped raise married a woman who was planning to systematically rob us blind. And for about 20 minutes, listening to their vows echo across the terrace, I almost convinced myself to let it happen. Almost. The reception moved to the main terrace as evening settled over the coast. Wine flowed, dinner was served on actual china, and the golden hour photography session produced exactly the kind of images that would look perfect in Melissa's carefully curated social media presence. Everything was beautiful. Everything was perfect. Everything was a lie. I'd been hiding behind various architectural features for 3 hours when the toast period began. Italian weddings, apparently, had this tradition where anyone could stand and speak about the couple. Not just the best man and maid of honor, but friends, family, random guests who'd had too much Chianti. Jessie had been nursing the same glass of wine all evening, positioned near the edge of the crowd where she could see both the happy couple and my hiding spot behind the stone wall. When the toast started, she caught my eye through the space between 2 olive trees. One look, one moment of silent communication. She was giving me a choice: signal her to proceed with our plan, or let it go and try to salvage what remained of our family relationships. I thought about Joshua's face during the ceremony, about Daniel's disappointment, about the possibility that I was wrong about everything. Then I thought about the business filings Jessie had found, the documented pattern of financial targeting, the sophisticated coordination between Melissa and her ex-boyfriend that couldn't be explained away as coincidence. I nodded. Jessie stood during a lull in the toasts, raising her wine glass with the practiced confidence of someone who'd spent years analyzing evidence and presenting findings. "I'd like to say something about second chances," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the terrace, "about being grateful for family, even when relationships are complicated." Murmurs of approval from the crowd. Joshua smiled at his mother, probably thinking this was about their reconciliation. "Family means being honest with each other," Jessie continued, her tone warming. "It means trusting each other with difficult truths, and sometimes it means protecting the people we love, even when it's uncomfortable." Her transition was seamless, masterful, really. Marriage is built on trust and honesty, on knowing that your partner is choosing you for the right reasons. Jessie's voice got slightly firmer, which is why I need to share some information that affects this family's future. The crowd's energy shifted. People sensed this wasn't heading toward typical wedding toast territory. Over the past few months, I've been conducting research using my paralegal training, public records research, business filings, property transfers, all publicly available information. Jessie pulled out her phone, her movements calm and deliberate. What I found was a documented pattern of strategic targeting of wealthy families through charity event positioning and marriage-based asset access. Melissa's face went white. Joshua looked confused, then alarmed. The financial consulting firm, operated by the bride's former boyfriend, specializes in asset research for wealthy families. Business registration documents show coordinated operations spanning 3 states and 4 separate families. Property filings reveal systematic asset transfers following marriages that provided access to family wealth. Jessie's voice was steady, professional, like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom instead of destroying a wedding reception. "These are public records, undeniable documentation, court filings from civil suits involving previous victims. business licenses showing specialization in wealth extraction through strategic positioning. Melissa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone terrace. This is insane. You're ruining my wedding with conspiracy theories. Property transfer documents from Nevada showing coordinated asset movement following marriage to a 73-year-old widow. Civil court filings documenting a pattern of strategic positioning at charity events. Business registrations linking the bride to a financial consulting firm that specialized in targeting wealthy families. Jessie held out her phone toward Joshua. The evidence is here. Every document is publicly available through state business databases and property records. Joshua took the phone with shaking hands. His face went from confused to devastated in the time it took him to scroll through the first few documents. These are real? He said quietly, his voice barely audible over the murmur of confused guests. These business filings. The property transfers. Melissa, what is this? It's a misunderstanding? These documents don't prove anything. They prove coordination, Jessie interrupted. They prove a pattern of targeting wealthy families through strategic positioning. They prove your boyfriend's firm specialized in asset research while you provided access through marriage. The reception was disintegrating. Guests were standing, moving closer to hear the conversation, some already heading toward the exit. Joshua was staring at his phone screen like it contained his death sentence. The charity event where you met, Jessie continued relentlessly, wasn't coincidental. Property records show you researched the family's assets before purchasing your ticket. Social media analysis reveals you positioned yourself specifically to meet Joshua through his stepmother's volunteer work. Melissa's composure finally cracked. This is harassment. This is exactly what that psychotic stepmother has been doing for months. Her eyes found mine through the window. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the moment she spotted me lurking behind the stone wall. There, she screamed, pointing directly at my hiding spot. That's who orchestrated this. She's been stalking me, harassing me, probably planning this whole thing. Every head on the terrace turned toward the wall, where I was crouched like some kind of discount spy movie reject. Joshua's eyes met mine across the garden, and I saw the exact moment he processed what my presence meant. First, the devastation of learning about Melissa's deception. Then, the secondary betrayal of realizing how far I'd been willing to go to expose it. The reception fell apart completely after that. Guests scattered toward the parking area, some clearly uncomfortable with the family drama, others probably texting friends about the most insane wedding meltdown they'd ever witnessed. Joshua confronted Melissa near the head table while she continued denying everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Public records don't lie, even when everything else does. I watched from my hiding spot as my stepson's fairy tale wedding turned into a crime scene investigation. Watched him realize that the woman he'd planned to spend his life with had researched our family like a business acquisition. Watched the moment he understood that his fiancé's love was actually a sophisticated financial con. And I watched him look toward my hiding spot with an expression that combined gratitude and betrayal in equal measure. 2 hours later, there was a knock on my hotel room door. Joshua stood in the hallway still wearing his tuxedo shirt and dress pants, though he'd lost the jacket and tie somewhere between the reception and my room. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked like he'd aged 5 years in one evening. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I let him in, and we sat on opposite sides of the small room, him in the desk chair, me on the edge of the bed. The Mediterranean view that had seemed so perfect when booking now felt like mockery. "Thank you," he said after a long silence, "for caring enough to protect me, for being willing to—" He gestured vaguely toward the window, "for flying to Italy to save me, for making the biggest mistake of my life." I waited, knowing there was more coming. "But I also feel completely betrayed by your methods, the lies about your investigative activities, the anonymous harassment, flying here without telling anyone." His voice was getting stronger, more hurt. "You violated my privacy and everyone else's to prove you were right. I was protecting you. I know, I understand that now. I see exactly how calculated Melissa's approach was, how sophisticated this whole scheme was." He ran his hands through his hair. "But, Victoria, you lied to me for months. You created fake social media accounts to harass wedding guests. You hired private investigators and conducted surveillance like I was a criminal instead of your son." The word son hit me harder than expected. She was going to destroy our family's financial future. And you destroyed our family's trust to stop her. Joshua's voice cracked slightly. "I can't handle having you in my life right now. I need time to process both betrayals, Melissa's financial con and your methods of exposing it." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I need space, Victoria, to figure out how to rebuild relationships built on honesty instead of manipulation, even when the manipulation comes from love." After he left, I sat alone staring at the Mediterranean while everything I'd fought to protect crumbled around me anyway. An hour later, Daniel knocked. When I opened the door, his face was a mixture of exhaustion and something that looked like grief. "I want a separation," he said without preamble. "You were right about Melissa. The evidence Jesse presented was overwhelming. But your methods, Victoria, the deception, the harassment, the lengths you were willing to go—" He shook his head. "You've shown me a side of yourself that frightens me. I was protecting our family. You were destroying it." His voice was quiet but final. "I can't be married to someone who thinks this kind of behavior is justified, even when the cause is right." He left without saying goodbye. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the window watching the sun rise over the Mediterranean. I'd successfully exposed Melissa's scheme and saved Joshua from a marriage designed to drain our family's wealth. I'd also lost my relationship with both my stepson and my husband in the process. Turns out being right isn't always worth the cost of everything else you love.